This video is sponsored by Raycon. Yes, that's right, the Everybody Loves Raymond convention is on again. Come along and meet all your favourite stars of the show, like that guy who was in that one episode of The X-Files, and this old lady, and, oh, this guy, he was in an episode of Seinfeld, I think. Okay, honestly, I hated Everybody Loves Raymond. I don't even know enough about it to carry on with this joke, so let's just get on with it. Doom 2. I've said it's my pick for the best game of all time, and I stand by that. What I don't stand by, however, is another comment I made a while back in my video on Sunlust, possibly the greatest ever MegaWAD made for Doom. I said this. And to be honest, Sunlust on the easiest setting is at least as tough as Doom 2 on ultraviolence. Oh god, is that what my voice sounds like? Yikes. Okay, that's it. Video's over. Channel's dead. Later, everybody. Well, no. Okay, I've started now. I might as well keep going. Anyway, yeah, I said that Sunlust on the easiest difficulty was tougher than Doom 2 on ultraviolence. But when I started thinking about it, I came to wonder just how accurate that statement was. The thing is, Sunlust definitely threw a hell of a lot of demons at you, but it also gave you tons of health and enough ammo to take down most of the world's armies, if only by drowning them in lead. Plus, I think I'd underestimated just how much difference it makes when you're only taking half as much damage from everything. The sheer number of enemies in Sunlust made the whole experience seem more intense and more intimidating, but it wasn't ultimately very challenging at all on the easiest difficulty. Proof of this can be found in the fact that I only died 17 times. Which I know doesn't sound that great, but for someone like me who tends to die in video games the moment an enemy looks in my direction, it's really not that many deaths. Then, a bit later, during a live stream, I had a go at making my way through Doom 2 on ultraviolence without mid-level saves. I didn't get very far. I managed the first few levels okay, but after that I started dying on a disturbingly frequent basis. I gave up pretty quickly. I'd been live streaming for many hours and I was incredibly tired. I figured that tiredness could partially excuse my terrible performance, but only partially. I was really starting to suspect that I'd understated Doom 2's difficulty. And maybe that was understandable. It had actually been many years since I'd played through Doom 2, and the fact is that the vast majority of my experience with the game came from the PlayStation version, which was much slower and quite a bit easier because of both hardware limitations that reduced the number of enemies, and the fact that the designers had to take into account that there were no mid-level saves in this version. So it seemed likely that there was quite a bit I was misremembering about the PC version of Doom 2. And that seemed like a good enough reason to give it a proper playthrough for the first time in a long time. So let's get into it. Doom 2 on PC on ultraviolence. And yes, I will be save scumming my way through the game. It's what I did with Sunlust, and I think I'll be relying on it even more now. I will, however, turn off mousehook, as Doom 2 definitely wasn't designed with it in mind. Not that it wouldn't be damned useful in places. Oh, and I'll be playing the Unity edition, apparently, which I guess is compatible with GZ Doom. I don't know specifically what the difference is, other than it runs on the Unity engine, but I've heard people say that it's arguably the best way to play old school Doom these days, so it's what I went with. Right, level 1, entryway. It's iconic, a real classic. This first image, the stairs and the enemies standing with their backs to you, has been seared into my consciousness, as has the chainsaw that awaits you if you bother to turn around. In fact, I'm pretty sure that 50 years from now, if I'm lucky, or unlucky, enough to live that long, even if all other memories have left me and I'm little more than a drooling simpleton, I'll still remember where all the secrets in this level are. And before you say it, no, I am not already a drooling simpleton. I usually manage to keep my saliva in my mouth, thank you very much. But yes, the shotgun, the rocket launcher, I'll never forget how to get them. And this secret door here, actually I don't know if I was ever aware of this one. Well, what do you know? Anyway, it's a great first level, maybe not quite as iconic as the first level of the original Doom, but given that was the world's first introduction to id's behemoth of a game, that's to be expected. Level 2, the Underhalls. Another level I'm intimately familiar with, just because of the regularity with which I load up Doom 2 and blast away until I get distracted by something else. It's another classic level, and already the challenge is ramping up. There are hit scanners in abundance, with shotgunners coming out of the walls at pretty much every turn, and they can shred your health in half a second if you're not careful. Of course, they're also incredibly satisfying to wipe out of existence with your own shotgun, and terrible as I am, I managed to get through without dying. Yet. Level 3, the Gauntlet. I've gone more than 25 years wondering what the deal is with that name. Is it a typo? Should it be Gauntlet? Or is Gauntlet simply a word I'm not familiar with? You'd think sometime in the last several decades I'd have succumbed to curiosity and done some research to find out what's going on. But nope, I've never bothered. Until now. To Google. So, Gauntlet is actually the archaic original spelling of gauntlet, when it's used to mean something you run through at least, rather than a glove. And it also has something to do with train tracks. The more you know. The chain gunner is the most important factor in this level. They're bullet-blasting murder machines, and they're introduced in a way that's seared into the traumatized brain of many old-school Doom veterans. This arena can very easily become your tomb if you're not careful, and I nearly die here. But not quite. And fortunately there's a generous serving of health and armor in this secret, which seemed like an incredibly creative use of the game mechanics at the time. It felt to me like the height of skill to run off the ledge at just the right angle. It doesn't really take much skill, but don't tell young me that. In any case, the supercharge and super armor are enough to see me through to the end of the level without dying. I managed to get through level 4, the Focus, safely as well. And this isn't a particularly memorable level. It's not bad, it's just a bit unremarkable compared to the first 3. Level 5, the Underhalls, is better. It's got some varied environments, a very nice secret in the form of a plasma rifle, and some nasty surprises in the darker reaches. Actually, is it just me or is it darker than usual in here? It really is almost pitch black in places. I suspect playing the Unity version with these enhanced lighting features has slightly messed up the brightness. And I can't seem to find any combination of brightness, gamma and saturation settings that make things visible without also making them incredibly washed out. Oh well, just adds to the challenge I guess. And I still haven't died, so I can't complain too much. Next up, level 6, the Crusher. And this one does what it says on the tin. The eponymous Crusher was a spectacular set piece by the standards of the day. These days though, I have to wonder, is this the best way to introduce such a formidable foe as the Spider Mastermind? It's not particularly menacing here, not once you realise where the switch to activate the Crusher is. I guess for returning players of the first Doom, it might be nice to see their arch-nemesis squished mercilessly like the overgrown creepy crawly it is. I remember where the secret megasphere is, which is handy, because the last fight here can be surprisingly intense with all the hit scanners teleporting around. I take a lot of damage, but manage to get out with my deathless status intact. The next level though, level 7, Dead Simple. It's another one that does what it says on the tin. It's simple, and I'm not getting out of this one without a death or 2, or 3. It's another classic iconic level. In fact, it started a tradition of short, sweet, lethal little kill boxes in user-made WADs, often coming in as the 7th level. Most of my deaths are the result of my apparent inability to grasp the consequences of blasting rockets into enemies mere inches away from my precious, flammable face. Fortunately, there's another megasphere close at hand, so it would almost be a challenge to leave this level without full health and armor. Now it's time for tricks and traps. As it happens though, I remember this level well enough to recall most of the tricks and to avoid almost all the traps. But not this first one, as I opened the wrong door and carelessly let loose a horde of the floating one-eyed melons we call cacodemons. This fight with the Cyberdemon and the Battalion of Barons was absolutely one of my favourite Doom set pieces as a kid. The sheer violent carnage of their infighting got my blood pumping. Of course, thanks to the invincibility, you can basically ignore them, grab the key and head to the next key, where there's another handy invincibility. If you know where you're going and you don't dilly-dally, you can pretty much spend the entirety of this level impervious to damage. So I'm not going to die here unless I mess up the final little trap with the descending floor, which is honestly a distinct possibility. But this time, I don't. Hooray, no deaths for me on this level. The next level though, the Pit, that's another story. This is where I got up to during that live-streamed no mid-level saving attempt, and it's where I became all but certain that I had drastically understated Doom 2's difficulty. The first sections aren't too bad, although I managed to make heavy weather of it. On the upside, I remember where there's a BFG tucked away, and I have plenty of cells to go along with it. In retrospect, I should perhaps have made better use of it, because the later sections of this level are kind of a pain in the neck, especially if your memory of the map is hazy, as mine is. There are damaging floors that must be traversed, obvious but deadly traps loaded with hit scanners, and confusing lowering floors that can trap you in confined spaces with more enemies than you can shake a shotgun at. All in all, the game isn't at maximum brutality yet, but it's getting there. And level 10, Refueling Base, is even closer to getting there. It's a great level, one of my favourites, but man, I found it unexpectedly tough this time around. It also has one of my favourite pieces of classic Doom music. Well, crap. Somehow, by some sort of reverse miracle, I managed to not record sound when I was playing through this level. Thanks for that, OBS. Actually, it's really my fault. For complicated reasons, I'm using one of my monitors as the default sound device for a recording input, and it gets reset every time I switch primary monitors, which for even more complicated reasons is fairly often. All this is a roundabout way of saying I really should have noticed that no audio was being recorded. Sorry about that. I'll just slap on the music anyway. Nothing I can do about the sound effects though. It's a really simple piece of music, but I find it effectively ominous. Anyway, this is the level where I gave up on counting my deaths, because there were just way too many of them. Certainly by the time I managed to claw my way out of this map, my death counter had far surpassed all the deaths I suffered in Sunlust. It wasn't necessarily the enemies that were killing me. No, wait, that's stupid. It was definitely the enemies that were killing me. What I mean is the toughest thing about this level was the lack of resources. I spent large amounts of time on very low ammo and very low health, which is not a great combination. This large, sprawling room packed with shotgunners and darkness was both a curse and a blessing, because hey, they drop ammo when you kill them, but also they're the very embodiment of the phrase "from my cold dead hands." Charlton Heston would be proud. Regardless of my struggles, I still think this is a really good level. It's hugely varied and there's a surprise around every corner. This room, for instance, has several ways into and out of it, and for every one of them there's a monster closet waiting to unleash its infernal occupants. There are plenty of secrets as well, including this one that lets you face the cyber demon with a handy invincibility power-up. Well, in my case it let the cyber demon absolutely annihilate me before I had any idea what was going on, but on the second go-round, things turned out better for me. Next level, Circle of Death, or is it O of Destruction? The game refers to it both ways, which confused the hell out of me in the past and made me wonder if there were two similarly ring-shaped levels that I had somehow merged into one in my memory. In any case, it's another good level in my estimation. The eponymous circle, or O, is kind of like a central hub, with little side areas filled with interesting and devious diversions. One of these is the game's first appearance of the Archvile. If I was going to rank every enemy in every game ever based on how much terror they've instilled in me, the Archvile would probably come out on top. The Cyberdemon would rank pretty highly too. The sheer dread that the clomp of his hooves still inspires in me cannot be denied. But the Archvile is worse. It's got speed, it's got lethality, it's got the ability to resurrect slain comrades, but worst of all, it's got possibly the most pants-crappingly terrifying sound effects known to man. When I get to Hell, which, let's be honest, is kind of inevitable, the demons won't have to exercise any creativity to come up with the perfect eternal torment for me. Doom's sound designer Bobby Prince has already done their work for them. Just stick me in a room with the Archvile's low, evil laugh emanating from outside, and that'll do it. They won't even need to incinerate me. The anxiety and dread just from the sound alone will be torment enough. Fortunately, even after all these years I know exactly where to expect the Archvile, so for now my dread is kept to a minimum, and I get out of this level without too many grisly deaths. Okay, next up is level 12, The Factory, and it's considered by many to be one of the weakest levels in the game. I understand why, but personally I don't hate it. The layout makes little sense, and the wide open spaces accentuate how bland and lacking in detail Doom looks at its worst, but that openness was still something that was a real novelty back in Doom's day. I get kind of lost on this playthrough. It's not a long level if you know where you need to go, but there's no real rhyme or reason to the layout. Even this I don't really mind. It was kind of nice to be thoroughly disoriented again in a game that is completely familiar to me. Well, it was familiar to me some decades ago at least. As far as the difficulty goes, it's a far cry from some of the earlier levels. There are plenty of resources at hand, and you can safely avoid at least half the enemies, and so long as you exercise a modicum of caution, there's nothing too taxing here. Level 13, Downtown, is actually pretty similar to the factory in some ways, but it's tougher, more complex, and more confusing. Like the previous level, it consists of a series of modular buildings, and I spent quite a while wandering aimlessly from building to building, trying to find the correct sequence of keys to pick up and doors to open. Also, like the previous level, not everyone likes Downtown, but again, I really don't mind it. There are quite a few Doom maps, many of them in the newer fan-made map packs, that try their hardest to simulate a real recognisable environment. Some of them succeed quite well at this goal, but I'm not generally a huge fan of them, even at their best. The Doom engine has many inherent limits, and while it's technically impressive what people can pull off these days, after literally decades of learning how to push those limits to their breaking point, I still prefer maps that at most only hint vaguely at some realistic construct. And that's what these last two maps, the Factory and Downtown, really do. They're only partially successful, but I respect that the designers didn't feel obliged to stick too closely to reality. Anyway, I definitely had a few deaths here, but most of my time was taking up trying to figure out where the hell to go next. Ultimately, of course, the answer to that question was level 14, the Inmost Dens. This is a real contrast to the previous two levels, as it's a tightly constructed map with orderly structured geometry. It's also a very good map, as it's fast-paced and with some brief but rather intense combat encounters, but it's not particularly tough and it's also not super interesting to talk about. It's just good, simple Doom fun. So, on to the next level. Which is level 15, Industrial Zone. We're back to another map that takes a stab at simulating a realistic urban environment, and while it's arguably less realistic than the others, I'd say it works significantly better as a Doom level. It seems to have a more coherent design to it, and it makes better use of the verticality of the geometry, allowing you to make some leaps from high places that lead to some nice surprises, including, ultimately, the secret levels. The difficulty is ramping up a little, but there's still not the scarcity of resources that I encountered earlier in the game. But enemy placements are getting a little more devious, and more than once I found my health getting whittled down to almost nothing by hit scanners sniping me from their lofty perches. And then, more often than not, a stray fireball or sudden lost soul attack would see my health go from almost nothing to precisely nothing, invoking what people in the medical profession might call being deader than a decapitated dodo, because we all know there's nothing that doctors love more than alliteration. But once I recovered from being dead using the miraculous medicine known as quick loading, it was time for the first secret level, IDKFA. Now that's weird. Apparently because I'm playing the Origin port, this is the version of the game that was slightly altered for the sake of the German market. So there are no swastikas to be found, and the portraits of Hitler have been replaced with portraits of his twin brother, who apparently wasn't quite such a fan of toothbrush mustaches. And these secret levels have new names. Regardless of what this level is called, I always found it to be a highly amusing callback to id's earlier FPS, Wolfenstein. And I guess it still is, but what I'm mainly left with after playing this level again is an appreciation of just how much vastly better Doom was than its predecessor. At its core, the gameplay isn't really all that different, but the limitations of Wolfenstein, the strictly 90-degree angles and the walls all exactly the same height, are so devastating to the overall experience. Don't get me wrong, on the few occasions I was able to play Wolfenstein in the days before Doom was unleashed on the world, I absolutely loved it, and just the fact it gave you a first-person perspective was a marvel. But when Doom hit, Wolfenstein became almost entirely irrelevant. Nevertheless, this level is a nifty bit of nostalgia, and the secret that contains a little bit of Doom's demonic world in with the old is a nice touch. But I can't say it's really all that fun. And the same is true of the super secret level, which in this version is called Keen, for obvious reasons. But at least this one has a cyber demon to tangle with, as well as a bunch of very useful secrets. It also allows, nay requires, you to murder 4 small children, but they're all Commander Keen, so that's okay. Also, according to Doom lore, Commander Keen is Doom Guy's grandfather, making this a time paradox multiple ancestor murder and possibly one of the darkest moments in gaming history when you really think about it. I don't recommend thinking about it. Anyway, with your grandfather murdered 4 times over and the timeline presumably messed up beyond all hope of redemption, it's back to the world of Doom, namely the Suburbs, level 16. This is another level that really sticks in my memory for a couple of reasons. Firstly, in the PlayStation version of Doom, the one I spent far and away the most time with, this level contained the exit to the mansion, a PlayStation exclusive secret level. Back in those days, the internet was barely more than a whisper of a rumour, so I had to figure out how to get the secret level by myself. And after a while I did, an achievement I was genuinely proud of. Not, incidentally, quite as proud as I was of finding the super secret level in PlayStation Doom, but that's another story. There's no secret exit in this version of the game, of course, but that didn't stop me trying to get to it through muscle memory alone. The second reason this level is so memorable is what happens when you pick up the blue key. A hidden door opens, letting loose a horde of demons who teleport into the arena, surrounding you if you're not careful. Now, 25 years later, the concept of many demons teleporting in when you pick up a key is just about the ultimate Doom cliché, behind only monster closets, but this level was really the first time it was done on such an epic scale. And of course, the scale seems a damn sight less epic these days. In fact, now we have slaughter maps with thousands and thousands of enemies, and the notion of a bunch of imps with a few cacodemons and mancubi thrown in counting as epic is kind of laughable. But in an historical sense, this is a truly iconic moment in the evolution of Doom. There's an invulnerability power-up nearby that makes the whole ordeal a good bit easier, but that doesn't stop me from copping a few fireballs to the face and nearly dying. Fortunately, I had the foresight to save the Megasphere for just such an eventuality, so I exit the level with full health and armor, which is nice. Level 17, Tenements. It's another well-designed level with tight, intense combat arenas that are small but not overly constricted. Particularly memorable to me is this staircase surrounding a caged archvile. Thanks to the fact it's imprisoned, this archvile really isn't much of a threat, but for me it helped to create the impression that we're delving deeper into demonic corruption, into a world where hideous monsters are trapped for all eternity, just waiting for you to walk by. The last section of this level came very close to driving my half-brother insane, as he didn't realise that each time you came to the end of one of these passages, a door opened at the end of one of the other passages. I'd say this really highlights the importance of having a decent audio setup, or at least ensuring that you can clearly hear the game audio, because the sound of doors opening in the distance can be absolutely vital, especially when uncovering secrets. As an aside, I'd offer the opinion that the sound design of Doom was just as groundbreaking as the gameplay and visual presentation, and massively important to the overall atmosphere of the game. In fact, I'd say it's one of the greatest achievements of sound design in game history. Well, on to level 18, the Courtyard, which I'm honestly disappointed to find is spelled courtyard rather than courtyard. Wait, this is spoken language, not written, so that might be confusing. I mean, it's written language now that I'm writing the script, but when I speak these words, which is now, it'll be spoken language, hence the name, I guess. Anyway, what I mean is that in my memory, the name of this level was always spelled as if it was the past tense of catch, which would make sense because one of the central features of this level is a large demon ambush within the central open space. It's a fun fight, but not super tough, as there's an invulnerability power-up if you need it, and there's health and ammo aplenty. And honestly, it's been a while now since I've had any real problems staying alive. Sure, I've died a few times in the last several levels, but that's mainly been down to my own ineptitude, rather than the scarcity of resources and devious design that killed me repeatedly way back in level 10. It might be partially because I'm being more thorough and more careful now, but the level designers are definitely being more generous in some respects at least. Next up, the Citadel, level 19. It's another map that attempts to represent a vaguely realistic structure, in this case a sort of medieval fortress surrounded by moats and various outbuildings. And it's actually the one I remember most fondly. It's not necessarily the best designed map in terms of combat encounters, but back in the day I totally bought into the conceit that this was truly a citadel, with various fortifications and several wings surrounding a central keep. And I like the fact that, thanks to the way the door to the exit was structured, finding all the keys was optional, but if you didn't get them all you'd be strongly reminded that you hadn't fully explored the level. Okay, level 20, Gotcha. Of all the memorable moments in Doom 2, this is possibly the one that had the biggest initial impact on me. A cyberdemon and a spider mastermind facing off in the middle of a large combat arena. It seems so damn epic, these two titans of terror going head to head. Despite the name of the level, it never really occurred to me that they were supposed to be a threat to the player. It always seemed pretty clear that what you were intended to do here was set them against each other and watch the spectacle. And back in the day, this really counted as one hell of a spectacle. The rest of the level kind of pales into insignificance after this opening gambit. Well, apart from the archvile that appears moments later, those things always make an impression. It's not a long or complicated level, but it is a bit of a step up in terms of difficulty. Well, it was for me at least, and I actually leave it on fairly low health. Which turns out not to be a huge problem, as level 21, Nirvana, gives you enough medikits in its first room to fill you up to 100% health several times over. And that's kind of a good thing, because I end up taking a lot of damage in this place, especially in this small box-like room that the game sees fit to fill with enough imps to tear you to pieces in no time, as I find out. It's another simple map and not the most interesting in my opinion, but it's also a very quick level, so it doesn't occupy much of my time, or much of my memory, to be honest. Level 22, the Catacombs, is a different story, however. It's also a fairly simple map that can be completed quickly, but it's better designed and more memorable. And it's not a good level to start on low health, because almost immediately you're required to enter into the middle of a rather nasty situation. You can take the elevator up, or if you know where the secret switch is, you can take the teleporter, but either way you're going to be surrounded by revenants, which are bad, and chain gunners, which are arguably worse. Thanks to the fact I was already more than half dead, I died once before I managed to scramble over a very welcome berserk power-up. From there on, the level becomes a damn sight easier to survive, and it really is a short level, but I nevertheless managed to come close to death a few times more, and by the end I have low armor and rather less than full health. Level 23, Barrels O Fun, is kinda like Gotcha in that it starts off with a very distinctive gimmick. It's not quite as awesome as seeing the two Leviathans of Doom blasting away at each other, but I still found this chain barrel explosion highly amusing back in the day. The rest of the level, though, is kind of irritating. Pain elementals make the first big fight a nightmare of floating, flaming skulls, and the chain gunners in this area are far enough away to be annoying to kill, but close enough to decimate your health in quick time. Plus, the nearby archvile looms over proceedings, threatening to melt your brains if you step out into the open. I have enough cells to make the Spider Mastermind only a minor inconvenience, but I then manage to die several times trying to kill the aforementioned chain gunners. Eventually I remember that there's a megasphere hiding just there, so I grab it and beat a hasty retreat. The chain gunners can live to fight another day. Although actually, since they're mere simulations created by my computer, they cease to exist the moment the level is unloaded from memory. Which I would say means I've got a 100% kill count on every level. On to level 24, the Chasm. This is a notoriously painful level for speedrunners, as one tiny misstep while running over the tightrope thin pathways can mean the death of a promising run. And even for the rest of us, this isn't necessarily the most pleasant map, especially if, as in my case, you can't control the urge to hold down the sprint and forward button as close to 100% of the time as possible. On this occasion though, I managed to rein in my more reckless tendencies and I don't fall off even once. In fact, I don't die at all in this level, but my safety comes at a cost. I'm nearly out of ammo. I even resort to the chainsaw to kill the demons in the last combat arena, which for someone with my lack of patience counts as dire straits indeed. I mean, I have rockets at this point, but even I am smart enough to realise that fast-moving demons in a relatively small area mean that any rockets I shoot are probably going to do more damage to me than to them. Fortunately, level 25, Blood Falls, is not so stingy with the ammo, even if you mostly have to annihilate a bunch of hit scanners to get your hands on it. This level lives up to its name in that there is blood, and it is falling, but other than that it's not a particularly exciting level. Well, this archvile, which I'd completely forgotten about, almost gives me a heart attack when it looms up out of the darkness, but thanks to my ability to hold down the mouse button in blind panic, it doesn't actually kill me. I am nearly dead though, again, so I scrounge up what health I can before moving on to the next level. Which is level 26, the Abandoned Mines. If this level has a theme, it's things shoot at you from behind bars. Which is annoying, but it's the random cacodemons that hand me my first death of the level. The lava floor hands me my second. It's a decent map, but if I'm being honest, I think the final third of Doom 2 may be its least successful. The most memorable things to be found are either mildly amusing gimmicks like Barrels of Fun, or mildly annoying gimmicks like the Chasm. Level 27, Monster Condo, at least has an aesthetic I quite like. It doesn't seem so much like a condo to me though, more like some sort of arcane infernal higher education facility, with its decor consisting of equal parts bookshelves and hanging corpses. And I like the fact that it teleports you between two almost identical rooms. That left me genuinely confused for a moment. But it's just not the most fun level to fight your way through, and the challenge factor is meh. There are a couple of intense fights, but health and ammo are plentiful and there's more than one invulnerability power-up, so I make it out death-free. And on to level 28, the Spirit World. And I somehow managed to mess up the sound recording again. 1,000 apologies. Anyway, the Spirit World is, disappointingly, another not super interesting level. And that really is a shame as we're so close to the end now. On the whole it looks kind of bland, although I do like this fleshy room. And this texture in particular has always intrigued me. I don't know exactly what it's supposed to be, but it always seemed both diseased and somehow obscene to me. The game really seems to have lost its fangs now. There are some potentially tough fights, but there are also enough invulnerability power-ups that you could almost run through the entire level with your screen bright white, if you were quick enough. The penultimate level, the Living End, is a good bit less forgiving, and thankfully it's a pretty good map as well. But still, the sound recording did not work. I just hope you folks are as familiar with Doom as I am, because my brain is pretty much capable of filling in the silence with all the required sound effects. Danger is ever present in this place, as you're forced to walk across exposed pathways and do battle with foes close at hand, while also worrying about fireballs flung from afar. The atmosphere is ominous and oppressive, just like the second last level should be. The full might of Hell's army is massed against you, and the level is packed with Barons, Mancubi, Hell Knights, and Archvile, and there's even a Cyber Demon waiting to stomp on your head just before the exit. And yet it's still really not that tough, and that's me saying that. Once again, that's down to the bountiful health and ammo. As has been common in these later levels, I take plenty of hits and my health gets low several times, but I've got enough ammo stacked up to blast my way out of most tricky situations, and there's always enough medikits and superchargers lying around to boost myself back up to robust good health. Even the final Cyber Demon surprise can be safely ignored, which I feel a bit guilty about doing, but killing it at this point just seems like unnecessary work. And so, finally, I make my way to the 30th and final level, Icon of Sin. And it's time for a confession. In all my years of playing Doom 2, I have never once legitimately killed this boss. I've just never felt the need to. I find the actual mechanics of killing it, i.e. well-timed rockets from near the top of the elevator, to be frustrating and not really very fun. So when I first played this map decades ago, I gave it a few tries, then just no-clipped behind the boss to see the legendary head of John Romero for myself, before smashing it into oblivion with a BFG blast. And then I reloaded the level and spent ages just killing the ceaselessly spawning enemies, and that was fun enough for me. But today, at last, it's time to finally do it legitimately, without cheating. Well, I'm still going to be save scumming, which is really cheating in all but name, but I'm still really not a fan of this boss and the sheer randomness of the fight. So this will have to do. Hooray, I've done it. After 25 years, I've properly finished Doom 2. And no, I don't really feel much of a sense of achievement, but that's fine, that's not really why I play games. Well, I did at least achieve an answer to my question. Is Doom 2 on Ultraviolence harder than Sunlust on I'm Too Young to Die? The simple answer is yes, but it turned out to be a lot more complicated than I expected. That 10th level, Refueling Base, was far and away the most lethal map for me, and I'd say if you took all my deaths from that level and maybe added them to my deaths in the pit and Dead Simple, they would easily account for more than half my deaths in this playthrough. And I'm honestly still not sure why it turned out like that. Certainly the fact that the health and ammo became more plentiful as the game went on is a big factor, but is that all? Maybe I really was just needlessly reckless in the earlier levels and learned to be more cautious as I went along. I'm not sure that's true though, as caution really is not part of my modus operandi. Not usually, at least. Ultimately though, the basic fact that I died more in this playthrough than I did when playing Sunlust on the easiest difficulty is sufficient proof that I was way off the mark when I said the latter was much tougher than the former. However, for me the much more interesting thing has been going from playing user-made maps that were constructed in the last few years, back to maps made by the pros more than 2.5 decades ago. It's clear to see just how far the art of mapmaking has evolved in that time. It's also clear that, although I called them pros, the folks who made the maps in Doom 2 were rank amateurs compared to the artisans of today. And of course that's understandable, the mapmakers of the early and mid-90s were pioneering a new craft, not to mention working under some serious time pressure. And they really were incredibly talented. The maps of Doom 2 may look a little dated now, but they still hold up pretty well. Certainly I'd rather play just about any of Doom 2's levels than the vast majority of linear corridors that have dominated FPSs in recent decades. Well, thanks for watching, and thanks to everyone who's been keeping me company in my live streams lately. It's been nice to while away the hours with some good games and some pleasant chatter. Until next time though, get off my lawn.